Hello, welcome to Know About History Channel. Hope you like it. The commander who stopped 300 tanks with a single thin line of infantry. 17 to 20, 5th of February 1941, the Via Balbia coastal road, a few miles north of Ajdabiya, Libya. Lieutenant Colonel John Combe is standing in the wind with sand grinding between his teeth. The light is low and flat, the kind that turns every ridge into a blade. Ahead of him the road runs like a dark ribbon across pale desert, and in the distance there's a smudge of dust so wide it looks like weather. That dust is an army. Combes' force is not an army. It's a flying column, a stitched-together handful of wheeled vehicles, a thin slice of infantry from the Rifle Brigade, a few guns from the Royal Horse Artillery, armoured cars and light cavalry elements, all thrown forward because somebody had to get here first. They have no time to dig in properly. They have no convenient ridgeline, no concrete, no trenches carved by months. They have what the desert gives them, a shallow rise, a few folds in the ground, and the hard fact that the only paved road in this part of Libya runs right through their position. Combe looks down at the men spreading out with forced calm. He can hear engines idling, metal clinking, shouted distances. The air smells of petrol and hot oil and dust baked all day on steel. He has one job: close the door. Because behind that dust cloud is the Italian 10th Army retreating out of Cyrenaica, a river of trucks, guns, wounded men and tanks trying to escape west. If they get through tonight, they live to fight again. If they don't, the campaign changes shape in a single night. And Combe is about to try to hold a road against something like 300 tanks, with a line so thin it's more an idea than a formation. The first Italian vehicles reach his roadblock 30 minutes after he arrives. It happens fast, almost offensively fast, like a door slamming before you've even decided to close it. Headlights blink through dust. The lead trucks brake hard. Men spill out, shouting, confused. Then the first bursts of fire cut through the dusk and turn confusion into panic. Combes' guns bark. Riflemen open up. The Italians hesitate, then pull back, and the long column behind them compresses, thousands of tons of vehicles bunching on a single road in the desert. It's a traffic jam with artillery in it. That's the hook most people miss about the Desert War. You don't always win by destroying the enemy. Sometimes you win by forcing them to stop moving. Because movement is life out here. Water, fuel, the ability to pull back before you get pinned, the ability to push forward before the other guy can react. The desert rewards speed the way the sea rewards buoyancy. Operation Compass, the British offensive that had started as a limited raid, had turned into a pursuit. The Italian 10th Army had been pushed back again and again, losing camps, then ports, then cities. Now they were trying to retreat along the one road that mattered. Their plan was brutally simple: keep the column moving, keep the tanks close, and outrun the collapse. The British plan was just as simple: put something in the road. But the British didn't have the luxury of bringing an entire division forward in one neat block. Their armour was worn down. Engines were tired. Tracks were chewed to death by rocks. Fuel was always on the edge of catastrophe. Their tanks, whatever they had left, were still hours away. If Combe failed, there would be no second line close enough to matter, so they sent the one man who could move now. Combe had been given a force designed for speed, not for holding. It was the kind of unit you use to probe, to raid, to seize a crossroads, not to absorb the impact of a tank-heavy army. Yet here on this road, speed wasn't the objective anymore. Stopping was. He chose the ground with a planner's eye and a gambler's nerve, a narrow choke point near Bedafom and Sidi Saleh. A place where the road could be blocked and the desert flanks, though wide, were hard enough to navigate at speed under fire. A place where a column of vehicles would have to either break his line or die in place. Night falls. The temperature drops fast, the way it always does in the desert, from day heat to a cold that crawls into your sleeves. Men hunch into their coats, metal contracts, engines pop and tick. In the darkness ahead, the Italians reorganize. And here is the difference between an army on paper and an army on the move. On paper you have formations. In motion you have a column, and a column has one spine. Break that spine and everything behind it becomes a liability. Around midnight, Combs' men work with what they have. Anti-tank guns are positioned to cover the road and likely approaches. Artillery sets firing lines. Riflemen dig shallow scrapes with entrenching tools that bite the hard ground reluctantly. Somebody runs a quick wire, somebody checks a magazine twice. Nobody sleeps deeply. Every few minutes there's the sound of a shovel on stone, or the soft clack of a breach being checked, or a whispered joke that dies immediately because laughter feels obscene when you can hear the enemy engines in the dark. Combe walks his line. He knows what's coming. Tanks don't negotiate with courage. Tanks negotiate with geometry. Arcs of fire, distances, penetration, angles. He has to turn bravery into a machine. The Italian tank force, much of it medium tanks like the M1340, is not invincible, but it's heavy enough to crush a weak point if the defense is sloppy. Their advantage is mass and the psychological effect of steel moving toward you in the dark. Their disadvantage is that in many tanks radios are limited. Orders travel slowly. Coordination is fragile. In a traffic jam at night, confusion multiplies. Combe intends to weaponize that fragility. At first light on the 6th of February, the Italians come. It begins with artillery. Shells walk across the roadblock area, throwing up dust and shards of rock. Then the tanks appear through the haze, silhouettes with hard edges, clanking, tracks grinding, guns pointing forward like fingers accusing the horizon. For the men in the foxholes, the sound is not a roar. It's a rolling vibration, a physical pressure in the chest. The ground feels alive under them. You can feel the tanks before you can clearly see them. This is where the human system fails most often. A thin line of infantry hears tanks and the brain does what it was built to do. It tries to survive. Some men want to run. Some want to shrink into the earth. Discipline becomes a muscle you have to force into motion. Combs' line holds. The anti-tank guns fire. The first rounds crack and smack into armor. Some ricochet. Some bite. Smoke begins to hang low, mixed with dust. Tank commanders hatch open for a second to look, then slam shut again. Infantry behind the tanks try to advance, but rifle and machine gun fire pins them in the open. The Italians push harder. Tanks move through the barrage and overrun parts of the forward positions, rolling right through where men had been moments ago. This is the most terrifying kind of engagement, when the enemy doesn't stop at your line, when steel simply crosses it as if your defensive geometry never existed. And for a moment, it looks like it might work. A few Italian tanks break into the rear areas, into spaces where the defensive layout is thinner, where a vehicle can do damage just by existing. Then Combs' defense reveals its real design. It is not one line. It is layers of choke and fire. A gun team is almost wiped out. Almost all but one anti-tank gun is knocked out. For a few minutes, the position feels like it's unraveling. This is the point where a battle pivots on something small and brutal. One last gun is dragged into position by an improvised crew, men who are not supposed to be a gun crew. They manhandle it into a flank angle. They aim at tanks that are now close enough that you can see dents, bolts, the dirty streaks of desert on steel. The last tank comes on toward an officer's tent that had been put up as if the world made sense yesterday. The gun fires. The shot lands. The tank jolts, smokes, stops. The steel beast dies in front of canvas and rope. It is not cinematic. It is not clean. It is a mechanical failure induced by a small crew and a single gun at the exact second it mattered most. And that is what stops a breakthrough. Not heroism as a concept, but a working weapon in the right place with somebody stubborn enough to keep it firing. The Italian push stalls again. Behind the stalled tanks, the column on the Via Balbia becomes more compressed. Vehicles bunch up, more tanks arrive, more guns, more men. It should be overwhelming. But now the Italians have a second problem. While they are focused on the roadblock, the British armour that Combe never had is finally arriving. To the north and on the flanks, British cruiser and light tanks begin to strike at the column's sides. Fast vehicles punch into the traffic jam. Shells and machine gun fire rake trucks packed with supplies and men. Fuel burns. Smoke pillars climb. The retreating army becomes a stationary target. Combs' roadblock does not have to destroy the Italian 10th Army by itself. It only has to hold long enough for the rest of the trap to close, and it does. For 2 days, the Italians attack, probe, try to break the line. They attempt flanking moves through the desert. They try to find a seam where the British are thin and tired and half out of ammunition. Combe adjusts his guns, shifts infantry, uses the desert's limited visibility as both shield and weapon, letting the enemy commit into uncertain ground and then hitting them when their formation is stretched. It becomes a battle of friction. Every hour that passes is a subtraction problem. The Italians lose momentum. Their column loses cohesion. Their commanders lose reliable communication. Their tanks burn fuel sitting still. Their men go thirsty. Wounded accumulate. Vehicles break. The desert is not kind to stalled machines. Meanwhile, the British and their allies tighten the net. Australian troops push down the road from Benghazi, closing in from the north. British armour harasses the flanks. The Italian 10th Army begins to feel like a body whose blood flow has been cut. Movement stops, options narrow, time becomes an enemy. And then the psychological pivot arrives. The moment the Italians realize they are not fighting to get through anymore. They are fighting not to be surrounded. In the chaos, Italian senior commanders are hit. The retreat becomes a surrender. By 7th of February, the Italian 10th Army collapses in this pocket. Tens of thousands of prisoners are taken. Hundreds of vehicles and many tanks are captured or abandoned in place. The road is lined with wrecks and discarded equipment, a frozen snapshot of an army that tried to escape and got caught at the narrowest point. From the outside, it looks like a classic victory. From the inside, it is something harsher. A victory created by speed, logistics, and a single decision to plant a roadblock in the right place at the right time. This is why Combe matters. He is not the most famous commander of the war. He is not a household name. But his action at Bedefom shows a kind of warfare that doesn't fit the mythology of grand battles. The battle where the decisive weapon is not a new tank or a supergun, but an interruption. A thin line of infantry, guns and wheeled vehicles became a valve on the only road that mattered. They didn't beat 300 tanks by matching steel with steel. They beat them by denying them the one thing an army in retreat cannot live without. They denied them forward motion. And in the desert, where every mile is a calculation of fuel, water and daylight, stopping an army is sometimes the same thing as destroying it. That's the cold engineering truth beneath the drama. A retreating force is a system under stress. Remove its mobility at a choke point, and the entire system begins to fail, from the lead vehicle all the way to the last truck. Combe closed that choke point with a line so thin it should not have held, but it did. And when it held, the desert campaign changed in a way you could measure not in speeches, but in prisoners counted, tanks captured, and an entire enemy army that simply ceased to exist as a fighting force in the space of 2 days.